cool. So now, your name is Mallory, or is it Call?
So my name is Mallory. My last name is
Okay.
Call. So
Oh, okay. So you just switched them up.
yeah.
That's good.
So for marketing, I changed it to Call Mallory, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
has been confusing people for years now. So
Well,
it's
hey,
really fun.
if it works, right?
It does something.
Yeah.
So we'll
Hey,
see how it goes.
I was in sales forever, and having, I had a lot of salesmen who use nicknames that made them more memorable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because they would never remember the name, but you'd remember whatever nickname or
Yeah,
something funny. You know what
totally.
I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a
So,
good point. Well, for me, kind of where it started actually was like several years ago before I
yeah.
got into real estate, I had started a business email and I just called it Email Mallory. And
Okay.
that way I was just thinking, oh, if someone needs to email me, they just think like, oh, Email Mallory, and that's my email. So
Yeah.
I thought it was genius. And, it's similar to the name thing where a lot of people will be like, oh my gosh, how clever. And I'm like, well, really, no, because I had to spell it out to you 3 times for you to get it. So
Right.
it's and the thing is it's like, then I just decided to add my name into it. So at the
Yeah.
time I was dating a guy whose last name was Call, and we knew we were going to get married one day. So I was kind of like, okay, like email Mallory, call Mallory, like do a whole thing.
Yeah.
And then it was really funny because I started in real estate with my maiden name, which was Beaudry.
Okay.
And then when I got married and then I switched my name on Facebook, literally for like 2 years, people were like, I didn't realize that was really your name. Like, or like people I knew, like people
Yeah.
people in real estate were like, I thought you were just like playing on words. And I'm like, no, that's my name. And then it was really funny. I actually taught a class at a brokerage that I was at on social media, and I was talking about my name and how I was using it for marketing and that it was creative.
Yeah.
And then later that day, I got a report on Facebook that somebody had tried to report me for my name.
Oh.
And I thought, okay, obviously someone from the class is kind of like mad that I have this cool name and I'm using it and all that stuff. And so they thought they could go report me. And I'm like, well, sucka, like it is my name and you are allowed to put your name, last name, and then first. So I just sent in my driver's license to Facebook and they were like, you're good to go. Like whatever.
That's so
so
weird.
like,
So is that a rule on Facebook that you're not allowed to use a fake name or something?
so you're not supposed to, like they can
Right.
tell like if you're doing something with names that aren't real. Do you remember back in the day when people used to sign up for email addresses and it would say things like that's not a real name or you can't use that word, that like the system didn't like what people were doing?
Right.
It's very similar. For example, when I go to type in my email address on any platform, if I type in email mallory@gmail.com and then a space, it won't recognize it. It'll say like invalid, totally wrong. But if I back it up, then it realizes that email wasn't a typo. It's just like really strange.
That is super weird. Wow.
Weird. And like, I mean, I think you have kind of, let me see, hold on. Yeah, you have a unique name. And and I'm sure you get asked all the time, like, how do you pronounce it, etc. Like, I have one of the easiest names and people still don't get it. Like, they're like, they're like, Kala, and I'm like, call, like a phone call, you know?
Yeah, like call. Yeah, that's so interesting.
But anyway, it's just been really fun. So that's my name. And I love when people message me on Facebook because I can tell if they don't know me, if they call me Call. So
that's super interesting.
Or if I get like even a solicitation and someone will say like, hi, Call, and I'm like, okay, like you don't know me.
You don't know who I am. Because, holy cow, that's a good one. I've started doing something similar like on LinkedIn and stuff like that because people will just message you randomly. And so, it's like if I put like an emoji in front of my name, I know that they just copy and pasted it because the emoji's there. But if you really knew me, you wouldn't put that there.
Yeah, exactly. You're not
that's super cool. And my mother does the same thing. So she goes by her middle name. And so same thing. Like when people email her or like solicitations or something like that, and they call her first name, she knows that they don't know her.
Yeah, exactly. It's really, I find it so fascinating.
It's really cool
journey. And I actually just went through a divorce and my ex-husband and I were talking about the name and whether or not I was going to keep it or go back. And a lot of people have asked me about it as well, just because I'm in real estate. I use it for marketing. Like it's a part of who I
Yeah,
am.
it's kind of like your
And
brand
so,
now.
yeah, it is kind of my brand
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
this kind of ironic thing where I'm like, oh, it's kind of my brand, and like I probably should keep it. But
Right.
at the same time, I believe in love, and I think one day I'll probably change my name again to a future
Sure.
husband's name. But for now, I think Call Mallory or Mallory Call works just well. So
Yeah,
we'll
no,
leave
good
it
for.
there, and it's pretty expensive to change your name, especially in real estate, because of all of the branding.
Oh
So
yeah, I didn't
that's
even
something
think
I
about
think
that.
a lot of people don't really realize, because we have all of our signage that has to have our legal names on it, all of our
Wow.
business cards, all of our websites, like any additional marketing materials that we've paid
Yeah.
for, etc. So, and I heavily brand my company and my name. So it is very expensive. It's expensive even if I decide to, as I have in the past, move companies until I opened my own.
Yeah.
And so I know that there are like these real costs associated with these things. And yeah, I think
Jeez.
people know me this way, so I might as well
You just
stick
keep
with
it
it. Yeah,
and if it doesn't hurt anybody, why not? Go for it.
he was
You
fine to
have,
let me do it, so we'll see.
yeah, there you go. Right on.
It's
That's
given.
super cool. So you own a real estate brokerage
Yeah,
or okay,
yeah.
cool.
So I am the owner and operator of a real estate brokerage called Attention to Detail Realty,
Okay.
and we are based out of Clearfield in Davis County,
All right. Okay.
but serve Utah. That's where we're licensed, so we're kind
Yeah,
of all
yeah.
over. Really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Tell me what you
Right.
want to know.
So, oh yeah, well, I mean, I want to know the story. So, have you always been in real estate, or was it a new thing? And what made you want to start your own company?
I love these questions. Yeah. So it's a journey, of course, like anyone's.
Right.
So basically, I have not always been in real estate. I have always been in what I consider to be need-based sales,
Okay.
which is basically, you being in the sales industry, there are certain
Yeah.
items that people purchase and consume that I think
Yeah.
are required, for us to really feel like we're living in a modern society, and feeling really comfortable with the way that I think the world has progressed. And so in my past, I did a lot of sales regarding to, actually I did glasses. So I help people,
Oh, cool.
figure out what their prescription, like what kind of frames they needed for their face and their prescription. I did a lot of like HIPAA claims for the company, and then I did a lot of purging of those files per HIPAA laws. And then
Mm.
I went around from location to location training other associates on how to upsell, how to like restock their area, how to file.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I did that. And I mean, obviously, like, I think that the thing for me is, as someone who wears glasses, like I have to wear them. Like I can't
Right.
see everything without them.
Right.
And so, there's a good amount of people in the world who need to see and see fully at 20/20 or better. If they're
Yeah. Yeah.
and at this point,
Yeah.
yeah, so I just kind of like would get into these businesses and these corporations, that, I mean, while I was in college, that basically focused on things that I felt like, it didn't really make it a sale in the same way, right? Like it
Yeah.
wasn't like,
Right.
here's this like bottle of perfume you might not need, right? Like it was
Yeah.
more like, you're coming here, you need glasses. Like you need the thing I'm going to sell you. So
Yeah.
now what I'm going to sell you is really the service, the product, the fit, and really make sure that that value's there. And so I think
Sure.
that having that kind of background makes a really big difference when you get into an industry that is commission based, especially real estate, because there is a lot of competition. There's a lot of people who
Right.
have breath. And I think that those things can make a really big difference in how people perceive you, and whether or not they decide that they want to work with you, and see the value that you're giving them, because it
Yeah.
is an exchange. So that's
Yeah.
definitely like a part of my background in terms of my experience in other industries and other things that I'm doing, and just really like just going from really the past to kind of moving forward. So as I mentioned, I was also in school. So I went to
Right.
college for corporate training.
Oh,
And
wow.
so did communication studies, and really just kind of decided that I didn't love the corporate world in its true fashion, right?
Yeah.
Where
Not a
everyone,
lot of people do. That's a hard one.
well, everybody is a number. They're no
Yeah.
longer seen as something valuable. And that to me is an issue.
Yeah.
And then corporations just don't really want to fix problems. And that was something I always found at companies I worked for, that I could find the problems and I could come up
Yeah.
with solutions, but they didn't want to fix it.
Right.
that was something that I knew like needed to change in my life, was I needed to be able to pursue something that used like my skill set, and then also allowed me to be able to bring up and bring to light things that needed to change and be different and be focused on. And so essentially once I graduated college, kind of was just thinking like, I need to do something with all of this to be able to make as much money as I can to be able to open a business, right? Like you just need money to open a business. So I'm like, okay, I need to find a job where I'm not limited to just an hourly wage, and something that would use a lot of the skills that I've already put together in my education, and then hopefully be able to set me apart and make some money and then open a business and go from there. So that was kind of the way that it all started, essentially, was just like analyzing really what I needed to do to create this bigger picture for my life, which was, I always knew I was entrepreneurial. I always knew I wanted to own a business. Didn't exactly know what that business was going to be, but just like seriously, since I was 5, I remember this. I was just talking about this with one of my friends. Okay, so back in the day, I'm gonna diverge for a second. So back in the day, the little like Rite Aids and Long Strugs and Walgreens used to sell these little fingernails that you could like slip over your fingers, and they were just plastic. And anyway, as a little girl, I used to go buy them. And then my mom, she was always self-employed or she always worked a job, as well as my dad. My dad owned his own company, so I was raised by entrepreneurs and 2 parents who were working. So I saw, my mom working all the time and doing that. And so whenever I'd go with her to work, which was like all the time, I would put these little fingernails on and I would start typing away on whatever surface. And I would always type in my head the same thing. And it was always Mallory Beaudry & Co. is now open for business. And I remember doing that. I was like 5, and I don't, what is Mallory Beaudry? Like, what is Mallory Beaudry doing, and who are the co? But I remember doing this like from a very, very young age. And I remember distinctly like growing up thinking like, I'm going to be a breadwinner. I don't care what my partner does. I'm going to be a breadwinner. I'm going to be someone who's successful. I'm going to own my own business. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to do that.
Good for you. Good for you. Like, that's sick. That's such a cool story. So you'd pretend to type that out on the table. Mallory Beaudry & Co.
Yep. Yeah. All the time. It was little.
That's so
cool. What's really kind of crazy, and we don't need to get all into everything, but I'm happy to share as much as you want. But like, so this was like, little child me who, sees her parents and admires them and has these aspirations and everything. And then, I grew up in the Bay Area in California. My parents, being self-employed, weren't home a lot. And so, I also grew up really quick. And I grew up in an area where it was really easy to grow up really quick. And so from a really young age, I actually started doing drugs. I was addicted to crystal meth at 13. My parents sent me to a troubled teen program. I was there for 2 years and 3 days, from age 15 to 17. I did 3 years of high school there during the 2-year period. I ended up coming out of the program a senior in high school, moving to a state I had never lived in, which at the time was Texas. And obviously had a very non-traditional education because I had been, doing drugs and missing school. I wasn't being taught in a traditional forum. And then the way education works in a troubled teen facility is very different. And so everything is self-taught. It's based on memorization. You just have to pass by a certain amount and then you move on. So there's not really a whole lot of comprehension check. There's definitely not a lot of consistent understanding. So it was really, really hard for me to come out of that world, almost an adult, with some like really awesome interpersonal skills and understanding of how to seek out morals and values and good people and all of things. But that's not how the world really works at 18 anyway. So it's like, cool, you gave me all these awesome resources, but the world's looking at me like I'm a total freak because I'm like, are you open to some feedback? It's just
exactly. Like, for real. Well, I appreciate that story though, because I had a brother who that was his experience as well. And, I have a lot of, empathy towards that, but I also know that similar, like we're talking right now, that you can be successful even though you have those experiences, you know what I mean? So it's very inspiring, very inspiring.
It's been really weird for me lately because, there's this whole like topic of breaking code silence that's come up, and being a troubled teen who was in one of those programs, my experience was just different than I guess some of these other kids. And I definitely don't want to discredit their feelings or their experiences.
Sure,
But
sure.
I mean, I was there for 2 years. So like, there's just this weird part of me now that's an adult who has, who's successful, who has healthy relationships, who's still progressing in life,
Right.
still seeks out good mental health practices, like,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
of these things. And then I see this kind of like topic and I'm going like, I don't even know what to say about this because
Yeah, yeah.
my experience was so different. I know mine isn't an isolated experience because I
Sure,
have
right.
really close friends and relationships with people who are from that program and the program life, and we all share the same views of it being a positive. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's just been really crazy for me is looking at a lot of what's happened in my life and the journey and even where I am and where I'm going. And
Right.
it's like, wow, there's been a lot that's happened.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's been really crazy. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of like, I mean, that's really, that was a lot, but that's a bit of
No,
where
but it's good because like that's what, that's the point of, what I try to do is I try to bring like those real stories out, because a lot of people see, they'll see, well, especially in Utah, and we talked about this, you mentioned this earlier, like it feels like everybody's a real estate agent, right? And or owns a brokerage or things like that.
yeah,
And so it's really fun to like, for me to get these stories out of people, because
yeah,
then it turns into something real. Then you're not just, you're not just supporting, a real estate agent. You're supporting a dream and an
yeah.
experience and a life. You know what I mean? And to me, that's different than going to Amazon or Walmart. Now I know that those guys don't sell houses, right? But you get what I'm saying.
I
you
mean,
know
Amazon's trying, but yeah,
yeah, dude,
I get what
Amazon's
you're
trying to do Amazon's trying to do everything.
everything. I'm
They're
like, get
trying to
out.
do everything.
Like,
I was in car sales for a really long time. They're trying to sell cars. They're, you know what I mean?
yeah,
They're doing a ton of stuff, but
figure out their
you-
shtick, right? Like they got to get somewhere. But you're right. I mean,
yeah,
in Utah, there are over 24,000 agents.
yeah.
So there's a lot of us, quote unquote, in terms of the collective us, right?
Sure, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But
In the industry.
everyone's different, and everyone is
Right.
going to offer something different. I think that there's some really interesting things that people can consider if they really want to get into what they may want to ask someone about
Yeah.
being a real estate agent and what they would do that would be different, because there are a lot of, quote scripts about, what we're going to do and how we're going to be and what we're going to say and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't use scripts. If
Sure.
anything, the way that things have progressed for me in my career is just that I've been able to generalize things in a way that's very palatable for people, that helps them make good decisions and ultimately allows them to be successful. And so it's really more of like a facilitation. I see myself much more as a consultant, a facilitator, somebody who's actually looking at it from the perspective of what's the ultimate goal, what are we really saying here, the
Yeah.
psychology of it. And so
Yeah.
you're definitely going to get a different experience depending on who you hire, because we all have
Yeah.
different things going on in our lives. We work for different companies. We have different commission splits. We have different monetary needs. We, have
Yeah.
different expenses because we're all self-employed. There are different goals for different agents as
Right.
well, different companies. So it honestly, it's the kind of thing where like, I wouldn't say that, some of us are better than others of us. Like, there are some of us that have more experience. There are some of us that do this more in terms of time and capacity and education.
Right. Right.
And there are some that, do this and it works for them, and that's all that matters, right? It's not for me
Yeah.
to be like, oh, what's that about? Like, I can
Right. Right.
see why there are different models. I can
Yeah.
see how those models work for people.
Yeah.
And I think that like, I really wish that people knew that there's just like so many more options. Like, it's really, it doesn't have to be this like full service, are we ripping people off, or like, give it away discount, we do nothing. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
either of those things. It can be so much of column A with the pricing of column B, depending on who you partner with. And
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
it,
and I think when you're talking about, an industry that has a lot of people in it, so real estate or finance and insurance or
car
things
sales,
like that,
yeah,
car sales. Yeah. I mean, when you're talking about that, I mean, you're your brand. I mean, that's what really, so that was one of the cool things, like when we connected, you know, I was like, Call Mallory. Like that's a cool brand and something that I would want to tell people, because you are your own brand, especially in a self-employed arena.
It's so crazy though, because honestly, in real estate, on the back end of things, they'll kind of teach you that that's actually a bad thing. Because
Oh,
the thing
wow.
is, it's like, if you think about it, if I'm the brand
Yeah,
and I own the company and people think of me, how do I leverage myself in the future away from more demanding positions in the company that maybe are not the best use of my talents or skill set,
sure.
when the general public expectation, or the thought is, call Mallory. This is actually like
Right.
one of the biggest things that I've struggled with in my career as I've
Okay.
developed a team and then opened a company, a brokerage, because what I started to see happening is that I was attracting talent. I was attracting people who wanted to come and be an agent underneath my team or my company, and they were seeing it and saying, I want this, I want to figure out how to do this, I admire the way you do business, I want to do business the way you do business. But then I started to realize, well, wait a second, the way I do business it's because it's me. Like these practices aren't 100% something that somebody can just go take and duplicate. You can't,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
really can't teach somebody to have empathy. You can't necessarily help
yeah.
someone have past experiences that may help them be more understanding and accepting and guiding
Right.
in the process.
Yeah,
There are different components. And so it really, like, that part of it, as I've analyzed my business and I think about the future and I think about my long-term goals, it does make me think, how can I even ensure that someone's going to get 80%, which everyone's saying I'm supposed to accept 80% as good enough. And I'm like, are you kidding
yeah,
me? I
yeah.
ever accept 80% for myself. I would accept that for my team to work for me. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So there's just
Right, right.
parts of it, but there's it's almost like a painful process to accept the fact that, like, maybe most people don't expect 100 or above
Yeah,
100%.
yeah,
And that's really where, like, that's painful for me as someone who loves to, like, do better and give more, is that I'm
yeah.
just like, what do you
Well, that
mean give you
yeah.
less? Do less?
Well,
Like,
yeah, no, but that's a common thing that comes up with, type A personalities, or like entrepreneurs, business owners, salespeople. Like that's really tough. And I don't think anybody has a perfect answer. I think there's a lot of good things out there, but I know exactly where you're coming from though. It's extremely frustrating. It's like, you know what I mean? And so you just got to kind of, you got to kind of play it by ear and just see. But I totally understand what you're saying, because because I've been in the situation too. It's like, what do you mean you can't, you know what I mean? Well, like, what do you mean you
yeah,
can't learn this? Or what do you mean you can't it doesn't make sense. Like I just explained it.
yeah. Well,
but like as people in our position, we have to learn, like, you brought up the word empathy, you got to kind of, I don't know. It's tough though. It's tough.
it is. I mean, it's hard, but that's why I've decided, to stay really calculated and to stay in what we'll call kind of the boutique size of my brokerage,
Okay.
because I really feel like I definitely don't have any interest in, one, doing myself a disservice, right? Like, I have to be
Yeah.
balanced in what I'm doing. I take on quite a bit because I normally don't say no. And so,
Right. Yeah.
like, it's a problem, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's
No,
worked for me. But it's like, you become
yeah.
almost like a slave to that, right? It's like, you
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
yes, you kind of feel like you have to keep doing that, and sometimes you start
Yeah.
thinking, like, do I want to say yes to this? Is this an alignment for me? And it's interesting to be at a place too,
Right.
as a business owner, where I can actually make that decision. I can say, like, this isn't an alignment, and therefore I don't need the income that you may be potentially offering me, because
Right.
we're
Yeah.
not going to
Yeah.
together, right? Or we're not going to be able to achieve the same thing. And so that's been really interesting as an evolutionary process as a business owner, just to kind of experience that selectivity, right? Like, where you can kind of
Yeah.
choose people and your people choose you. And so that's why, for me, I find that real estate's been super rewarding, because I've been able to make all of these friendships and all of these different new dynamics in life that I don't think is really expected up front. I
Yeah.
don't think you get into it thinking, like, I may walk away with some of the best friends I've ever had, some of the, like, most
Yeah.
rewarding experiences, some of the most emotional processes. I mean, honestly, like, I
Yeah.
am incredibly empathetic, and it's very hard for me not to feel things with people. And so
Yeah.
it's one of those things where, we hear the good and the bad. We
Right.
see all kinds of things in regards to how people are living or how people view living. And it is just such an eye-opener on human psychology and just the brain. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, it's so fascinating. Man, my brain
Well,
doesn't stop. So,
well, it is. No, I mean, I feel the same way. Like, it's very fascinating. Like, people, interacting with people, persuasion, influence, all that stuff, like, really fascinates me. Negotiations, stuff like that. But, I want to ask kind of a question, because this gets brought up almost every time that I interact with somebody who wants to start a business. Like, I had a really good friend of mine, he's the same way, wants to start a business, wants to do something on the side. But he gets paralyzed by this thought of like, there, like, there's too many of us or whatever, right? Like,
saturation. Yeah.
there's a million of this, there's a million of that, like,
Yeah.
so how do you, in an industry, in your experience in an industry with a lot of people, you said 24,000, how do you handle, like, what was your thoughts of starting a new brokerage? Because, there's a ton of them out there, and I just want to hear, like, your experience on being faced with that. Because I'm sure it was a thought in your head, like, man, there's a million of these out here, right?
Sure. I mean, honestly, the thoughts that were and are in my head, more to be like so candid.
Yeah.
I wish, honestly, like I genuinely wish that as someone in their 30s that I didn't care about what people think.
Sure.
But I do still. It's one of my goals.
Well, that was a tough one to get over. Like,
And so for me, the biggest thing, honestly, that I think about as a boutique brokerage owner is the perception of, what if I decide that's not what I want anymore? What if I don't want to own that company? What if I want to franchise something else? What if I want to move to a different corporation structure or whatever it may be, right? There are so many opportunities in real estate that really, like, there are choices that I could make like that. And for me, it's not so much about like being another company that didn't even faze me. Like, I don't.
Sure. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that's cool though. Okay.
Because it isn't where I'm not competing with these other people. Like that, I think, honestly, to help some, right? Like, where it's challenging in real estate, like, you could become an owner of a brokerage without your license, but you can't be the principal broker. Okay, so it's very intricate. So basically, you could have ownership and therefore be collecting money from people in your downstream or however your structure is, and not have a real estate license. And there are some people that do that. Most people who own their own brokerage have a broker's license, and they're typically the principal broker of the company, meaning that they are the owner, operator, and they are licensed to do the business.
Yeah.
Now, prior to that, which you can't just get into real estate and become a broker.
Right. It takes time.
Like, there are some things, like, if attorney's license, a certain amount of transactions from some other similar industry, et cetera. So there's all these different little things you can kind of sometimes work around, but predominantly you have to go through being a sales agent. So getting licensed as a sales agent, working under another brokerage, and then you have to get a certain number of transaction points. Then you get audited, then you go through another licensing course, and then you become a broker. But when you become a broker, you can become a broker as an associate, meaning you're just staying at the company you're at. You're just now a broker. It doesn't necessarily have a managerial role. Or an ownership role, but then the principal broker role is different. So the reason I bring this up is because the thing is that when you start a regular business, most people just start it, right? Like, it isn't exactly like it would be with the progression of starting a brokerage. Starting a brokerage means that I had so many years of experience under another company with their liabilities, with their brand, taking my own branding and marketing and throwing it on there, building my own clientele, and then moving that to a point where it was like so sustainable that there was no need for another company to be able to run my business or add the value or even build greater value. And so that's where that decision came in for me. It was, the culture isn't what I need or what I want anymore at the company that I'm affiliated with. There's nothing wrong with that. That happens.
Sure.
And things change. And so, that wasn't working. I'm the type of person, as I already said, I tell all my clients, you cannot make a good decision unless you're educated. So you need to know your options. So for me, when I knew I didn't want to stay at the company I was with, it was like, now I need to know my options. So I knew, okay, I can go be an associate broker somewhere else. I can be a principal broker of someone else's company. I could open my own company. I can just move companies in general. So I could do all these things. And I had already been at a few of the big corporate companies. So I kind of already knew I like corporate in the sense of their big brand recognition, there's a certain exchange, you kind of know what you're getting, etc. There's a lot of training that they offer. Sometimes it's good for recruiting. It just depends. So there's a lot of different opportunities with big corporate brokerages. So I interviewed a few. I had lots of opportunities. I had people offering me to open up their company, become managers of their branches. I even still now have people from out of state asking me to open their company for them. This is something that I know will continue to happen because I'm going to attract people with like energy who want to grow, who want to do more, who want to make a better culture, who want to teach people what they're doing so they can be competent and valuable and then, do good for others. So it's so different. That's why I hate that I had to give you such a long answer, because it's like, you have to understand for someone from the outside perspective of business that it is very different than opening just like
than just starting your own business just from scratch or something like that.
It's kind of like, it's just so different. It'd be selling something at the grocery store and then them opening their own grocery store. It's like, well, you don't necessarily understand everything about grocery stores because you just sold one thing in a grocery store.
Sure. Yeah.
And the same goes for real estate.
Well, so no, in a way that it does answer the question, because a lot of people think that they can, go into a business opportunity and not know anything, so it's really, so it's interesting, to hear your experience of like, no, it's important to have experience to go through these, licensing. Cause I'm familiar with the process of becoming a sales agent and a broker and stuff like that. So it makes sense. And a lot of people, don't do that. They think that, they just go in, and kind of just forget that they should learn about some of this stuff. And I talked to someone similar, I talked to a guy who owned a few mental health clinics. We were having a similar conversation, asked a similar question. And he said pretty much the same thing. He's like, before you start a business, you should learn all about the different, organizations that you're going to have within that business. So like accounting, marketing, things like that. He's like, because if you don't, if you're the owner and you don't know how to run those things, you could get into trouble. So I appreciate the response, because I believe that that'll help some people, some people who will be like, I don't want to work my 9 to 5. I'm going to go start a business and do nothing to prepare for that. And that can be almost as dangerous as overthinking it.
I think that you brought up a really good point, because I think the problem is there's like these schools of thought that seem to be kind of either or in nature. And there's this whole kind of like principle that, so there's the people who are like, just jump in and learn as you go. And then there are the people who are like, learn, and then decide. And I'm not saying be one or the other. I'm saying, start taking steps. And as you take steps at each juncture, learn more. And before you take the next step, make sure you've learned enough to take that step. And it's enough. The enough part is where it's difficult. And that's the thing. I have a lot of people come to me and say, I want to get into real estate. And the thing is like, I remember my journey getting in, and they don't tell you, like, they don't explain right up front. I have not found any graphic. I should probably make one that says like, from start to here, like from the beginning of schooling till the time that you get your license, it's going to cost you this much, it's going to take you this much time, and you're only going to learn this little piece, which is the piece that covers the government's butt, because that's all they care about. And so it's like literally I remember when I started, which I only started like 6 years ago. It's like, so I built this in a really short amount of time.
That's impressive.
I remember it was really cool. I feel silly saying it now, but because it was funny. But when I started, I went to this brokerage. I met this girl who owned her own company, and she was kind of talking to me, and I was telling her all these things I want to learn about real estate and all these things I want to do. And I remember telling her, I really want to learn about the different kinds of flooring, and I need to know about the different colors of paint, and I need to know about the different countertop materials. And she just looked at me like, what? Like, like, you don't, that's like so silly. Don't even spend time like at a showroom or Home Depot learning about this
Sure.
stuff, because you actually just learn so much through going through the homes and reading the descriptions and looking at the materials and talking to the owners, and then having the inspectors go through and talking
Right.
about it. And to like, now, this was so funny. Yesterday I walked out,
Yeah.
staying at an Airbnb in Salt Lake, and I walked out of the Airbnb, and they're doing a sewer repair, and so the guys all of a sudden stop their crew machine, and I'm like, oh, are you doing a belly or a main line? And they just
Yeah.
started laughing, and they were like, how do you know, like, how would you know, like did you have work done to your house? And I was like, no, I'm in real estate. And they just started laughing, because
Yeah. Yeah.
you just get to learn these really weird things if you actually
Cool.
like take it in.
Yeah.
And
And if you care about learning about them.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
honestly like, it's always something new. There's always something cool I can learn. I have a list of things that I'm like, I want to learn this, I want to do that, I want to focus on this. It's so, it like honestly could just go
Yeah.
on. I could literally never stop working.
Right.
But honestly, the problem for me is I'm so busy working in my business that I don't have enough time to take these ideas and things that I'm so like excited about and work on my business. And so,
Right.
that's, I guess, it's a blessing and a curse, and I'm going to
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
this.
It's
And
one of those kind of double-edged things. Well, but I like that you mentioned like knowing enough to take the next step. And I think that that is super crucial. Like, you know enough to jump in, because you can't learn everything. And you're right. Like, where's the, what's the definition of enough?
yeah,
I think time has to be a part of that, like learn
yeah,
as much as you can in this amount of time, and then you got to go.
yeah,
Right. Once I hit this time limit,
yeah,
I've just got to pull the trigger, because a lot of people get in that analysis paralysis, and or they, like I mentioned earlier, they jump too soon, they never jump.
yeah,
Um, and
totally.
and so it's really cool to see, like, but really cool to see that you've built your business in what, so, I mean, 6 years is a long time and it's a short time.
Um,
Yeah. A lot
really,
can happen in 6 years, and and
considering where I'm at, it's actually really short. But that,
yeah, yeah,
I'll
but
kind of
it's
just like,
cool. Yeah.
oh, super cool. I'm like, I'm stoked. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I've never
Yeah.
ever
You
feel like
should
it's
be.
great. But I think it's important for people to understand, because I think a lot of people don't
Yeah.
really know. And it's honestly like, to me, I've never been about the transaction. It's about the goal. Like, I tell
Sure.
every single client this: if I achieve your goal, the byproduct will be that I will eventually get paid. I don't
Sure.
actually care about the getting paid part, because the goal is what I need to focus on. This other
Yeah.
thing is going to happen, right? So I
Yeah.
already know that
Exactly.
if I do right by this. And so that's something that I'm able to really just have that, like, that healthy mindset on, and that focus on, where it's not about the income. So I do, I obviously track my business and what I've done, because that's how, I mean, it's transactional, and we do need to pay attention to these things to grow.
Right. Right.
But for me, it's been one of those things where I've been really shocked at the statistics overall, because you don't, if you don't know what they are, you don't know how to calibrate it. And a lot of people are really surprised. So I'll throw a couple out.
Yeah.
So I'll go national first. The national
Yeah.
average on home sales per agent is 8 in a year.
Whoa.
So as a real estate agent in the United States, you might average around 8. In Utah, that average drops down to 2. So in the state
Interesting.
of Utah, there are around 24,000 agents, and there's around 48,000 sales that happen in a year. So that averages to 2.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, just to give you an idea, my very first year in the industry, which was, I'm now in November, I'll hit year 6.
Okay.
So I'm just finishing up year 5. My first year in the industry, I did 16 transactions. My second year, I did 28. My third year, I did 42. My
Wow.
fourth year, I did 65. My fifth year, I wrapped up 75. This year, I will likely go under, which every year I've gone 30% either in transactions or in gross commission.
Right.
But this year has been very interesting.
Oh,
I
dude. Well, for everybody, right? I
Yeah, I
mean,
think everybody got
2020
the
is weird.
same blender in the mail. And
Yeah.
I just like, seriously, anyway, it's fine. I think
But
what,
that's okay. Like, but
yeah, it's fine.
when we're talking about, numbers and stuff like that, I think you brought up a good point, is like the goals are
Yeah,
more important than the transactions. So like, what am I learning this year? And
yeah,
I think that's why so many people get disenfranchised with corporate, is because it's results. And I'm not saying results don't matter. I'm not one of the, the fluffy guys that like, you never have to make a sale as long as you learn something. Like, no, eventually you got to like get some results and do some things. You know what I mean? Otherwise, get out of what you're doing. But on the flip side of the coin, it's sometimes we do have bad years, sometimes we have bad months. And did we learn enough to keep going? Do we have enough grit to keep going because we know what we're capable of, and we know that this is an outlier, and can we keep going? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, and totally, like for me, like I'm actually not bothered by it. Like it's
good.
Where like when I set my goal before everything happened for the year, I just set my goal to basically maintain the same amount of clientele, but to essentially change some of my strategies in regards to either price point or location that I really wanted to start focusing more in, some things like that. And that definitely presents its own shift, because I started thinking, why do I always feel this need to constantly just do more and more and more and say yes and yes? And what am I getting from that in terms of, my mental health and, my physical spirit and all of these things. It just became really prevalent to me that it really didn't matter anymore if everybody else expected me to keep growing and doing more because I could. It was just more like, you know what, at this point, and still, like, if someone said to me, we would pay your bills, you can live your life, just keep doing good, keep doing what you're doing, I would do it. I wouldn't even, period. There's not a question. I would do exactly what I'm doing. Period. Because it's like, I don't need to know the dollar amount that my life costs in order to have enjoyment and fulfillment from this career and from helping people.
Interesting.
But it's just been cool. And honestly, like, I think I kind of like that, in a way, I'm kind of grateful that everything has happened as it has in some ways this year, because it's allowed me to take a lot of pressure off of myself that I normally would have like really heavily placed. And so I feel like it's kind of a recalibration of like my expectations for myself, and really thinking a lot more about what's going to make me happy, what is happiness, and creating balance in the pillars of happiness in my life. So not just my business, but my relationships, my personal relationships, etc. So, I mean, honestly, life is very rewarding. I love living in Utah. Real estate is great. I'm sorry to be that person who's just like, hey, but
that's good. No, it's good. I think there's a go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I'm an optimist. That's just how it is.
Yeah. Well, and I think that like, the optimism and positive thinking like does a lot of good for people. I'm very like, I get a lot of the optimism and the positive thinking. I'm also, and I think you're the same. I think a lot of people are the same as us as far as pragmatic. We're also realists. Like we're also going to be like, you know what I mean? And I think you were saying that. I'm not saying that you missed something. Because I believe that that's what you were getting at, but it's more important than pragmatism and realism is just making sure that your head's right. Like the optimism, the acceptance, like, hey, things are going to happen, but I'm going to get over it. You know what I mean? I'm going to get through it. I'm going to go under it, whatever I got to do. You know what I mean?
Exactly. No, that's it. That's all we like can do at this point. And
dude, especially with 2020.
I'm not where I need to be, but I'm getting there. And I think others can hopefully hear that that's not something to stigmatize.
Right. Well, I think when you start stigmatizing it, you fall further back.
Totally.
You know what I mean? And it's that weird paradox. The more you are uncomfortable and dislike the fact that you're not where you're supposed to be, the worse it gets, because you just gotta, accept it and push forward and learn the lessons you got to learn and keep going. And I think that there's no, that you can still have positive thinking and self-optimism with all of that. So, and by the way, all the haters, it's like, who cares? Because I'm still doing more than a hater would. and people who are working don't have time for that. Like, I don't care. You know what I mean? It's
I mean, it's true. I mean, really, honestly, like, the revenge is on the scoreboard, but at this time, it's just one of those things where we are a community, and so we're together. And I mean, that's even how we were connected, through Connect Utah. And
I love that. group.
That's really useful. I
It's
love it,
super
especially
fun.
as a professional. But I like to read other posts because they're good and informative for things for the future, even if you don't need them right now.
Right.
You kind of go, oh, that's cool. Or, oh, I love when someone asks something and they get all these great advice tips and you're going, I needed that. Like, and you're going,
Yeah, for real.
no, they just gave me all this insight.
For real.
Oh, that's actually one of my favorite things. I love when I might get tagged on a post for something for real estate and someone else
Yeah.
gets tagged. And I love when the other agent keeps their conversation on the wall. So like I can see like how they're handling like their lead follow-up and everything. And
Oh
I
yeah,
always
man.
I go straight to DM, and it's funny because I'll watch when I end up converting the person and the other person didn't, but I can kind of see like, oh well, like, and there was this one time, this is so funny. Okay, I'm gonna tell you this story.
Yeah. Okay.
This was a past agent in my company, and she ended up leaving the company, and we were, competing for a referral. And I thought it was ironic, and I'm like, here we go, I'm gonna go get it, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're having the conversation and I can see what she's saying and stuff. And all of a sudden it gets to the point where the referring agent like somehow forgot that she needs a Spanish speaking agent.
Oh.
And I'm just sitting here going, oh crap, because like I took Spanish in college, but I don't speak Spanish now. And I was in the National Honor Society and all this stuff. And anyway, this was what was golden. Well, it all comes back around. This story is really funny, actually. But anyway, so this was golden. So my previous associate comments that she can get a translator. And I'm like, brilliant. If she can get a translator, I can get a translator. So I'm like, I got this in the bag, right? I'm like, okay. So now I'm like, private messaging, like, no, I can get a translator, and my preferred lender does speak Spanish. So I'm like, my lender speaks Spanish, all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So she's like, it's yours. And I'm like, yes, like, I'm just like, this is awesome. I feel great about it. It was so funny. I have all the screenshots. It's hilarious. Anyway, so this whole thing goes down.
Yeah.
Come to find out, right? Because again, like, I don't care. It was just like, whatever, go get the gold.
Right.
She ends up finally like divulging the client's like location, price point. You get where I'm going. This is really funny.
Yeah.
So, and it's a referral, so we got to pay out something. Anyway, so she goes, okay, so they want to buy a piece of land. I'm like, okay, we can help them. Like, no problem. And she goes, it's like, I don't even remember the city at this point, but it's like 3 hours away. I'm like, okay, we can help them. Yep.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we look up the land, and it is a $10,000 piece of land, which means that the commission, if it would be like $500 maybe.
Yeah.
And, we'd be driving 3 hours each way and all this stuff. And this is why it's just so funny, because I'm like, I went to town, right? I'm like, I'm gonna get it. And then like, like a little karma was like, you probably shouldn't have done that, but anyway, we still helped him out. I feel good about it because, well, unless the other agent hears this, she's never gonna know that it's like a $10,000 deal. But let me just tell you, it's one of those things where it's like, you think you're like, sweet victory, and then anyway,
for real.
I just, the whole thing is just so fun.
I like those stories, because it's just like when people realize that karma and these things, like they're just really funny stories. I mean, I have a ton of them too, where it's like, I probably should have rethought that, or you know what I mean? It's like, like, of course life would. Yeah, of course the universe would do that.
It's like, how much more karma would it have been if I had like pushed it on her? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I had known, if I just known, I could have been like, you take it, No, but it's just really one of those funny things.
That's awesome.
We're happy to have helped, and time,
Well, good for you, man. That's such a fun story. I mean, I really enjoyed our conversation too. Like the time is fun. But okay, so I do this with everybody, but how do people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
Man, so apparently I've got some good SEO. Apparently, if you type in Mallory and Realtor, and if you're in the state of Utah, Google will find me as like the first thing on every website.
Right. On.
If you need to find me even more, you can type in Call Mallory on Facebook. You can also do that on Google. You can find me on Yelp, and you can find me on Zillow. I'm all over the internet. If you want to check out my website, it's super cool. I had a hand in designing it. It is www.a2realty.com. So it's a2drealty.com. And
man.
If you actually want to call me or text me, beat me, you know how to reach me. It's 801-673-0456.
Sweet. I love that's Kim Possible,
That's
right?
impossible.
That's right. I
like,
love that reference. Right on.
I am
Cool.
like the worst, I swear. People feel like you love me or you hate me. So like,
No, that's freaking, it's sweet. It works though. It works. That's why I love, the business owner, because you get to see the business owner. Like we got to meet Mallory today. You know what I mean? An authentic, not saying that you're inauthentic other times, but you see what I'm saying.
It's real.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's good to have these. So,
Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you. And I'll make sure to refer people to you, and thank you so much for being here. And it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.